In that agonizing moment as I walked in, peach cobbler in hand and a carefully wrapped gift for my 65th birthday, I had no idea I was about to be cast into a personal hell of solitude and abandonment. "Mom, could you just wait downstairs for a bit? We're trying to keep the upstairs organized." My daughter-in-law, Serena's seemingly soft words, sharp as a blade, tore through every hope of a warm, celebratory day. Have you ever felt treated like mere furniture by your own family, the very people you love the most? This isn't just a tale of hurt. This is my journey to rediscover myself, redefine what family truly means, and teach them a harsh lesson they'll never forget. Would I crumble in the basement's shadow or rise stronger than ever, building a table of my own? Join me as I explore how a 65-year-old woman turned disdain into strength, forever changing the course of her life. This story will alter your perception of kinship and self-worth. My name is Clara Henderson, and at 65, I still believed in the sanctity of family gatherings, the warmth of a homemade meal, and the simple joy of being surrounded by loved ones. My 65th birthday, a milestone by any standard, should have been a day filled with laughter and heartfelt embraces. Instead, it became the day my heart was broken. Not by malice, but by indifference, which, in many ways, is far more cutting. I had spent that morning meticulously baking Tom's favorite peach cobbler. Every plump, juicy peach, every golden, flaky crust was infused with a lifetime of love and devotion. This wasn't just a dessert, it was an offering of my very essence, a tangible piece of my soul, presented to those I cherished most. As I stood outside the opulent home of my son Tom in the affluent, sun-drenched suburbs of Glendale, California, the cobbler warm in my hands and a gift from my grandson Leo tucked under my arm, an unsettling silence hung in the air. No one came out to greet me. The driveway, usually so inviting, was crammed with sleek black SUVs and shiny sedans, reflecting the dazzling California sun. I didn't mind the short walk from where I had to park across the street, telling myself the massive gold and white balloons adorning the mailbox were expensive, tasteful ones, not the dollar store variety I remembered inflating myself back when birthdays meant hand-painted banners and simple chocolate sheet cakes. Yet a knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach. The absence of a warm welcome, my hands slightly trembling from a touch of arthritis and a deeper tremor of apprehension, clutched the cobbler as I slowly approached the front door. I wasn't sure what mood Serena, my daughter-in-law, would be in. She was a woman of stark contrasts, a dazzling smile reserved for her Instagram followers, and a weary sigh, or perhaps an indifferent glance, for me. It had been 3 weeks since I last saw Tom, and our last conversation was a curt text message invitation. "Party starts at 5. Dress nice." I had taken his words to heart, donning my best slacks and the blue blouse that my friend from church, Eleanor, always said brought out the color of my eyes. I even curled my hair and wore the delicate gold chain my late husband, Frank, had given me on our 30th wedding anniversary. Every detail was meant to convey respect, effort, and, above all, love. When I finally knocked, it wasn't Tom who opened the door, but Serena, resplendent in a shimmering silver gown, a full face of immaculate makeup, and a champagne flute in hand, looking as though she'd just stepped off the pages of a high-fashion magazine. There was no smile for me. Her eyes widened, a flicker of surprise, almost as if my presence was an unexpected intrusion. "Oh, you're here early," she remarked, her gaze darting behind her, as if assessing the scene she was curating. "Guests are still arriving, and the photographer is setting up." She gestured inside, and I followed her through the bustling hallway, a stranger amidst a sea of unfamiliar faces in suits, holding champagne flutes. I passed a table laden with appetizers I didn't recognize, tiny, intricate creations on skewers and shrimp that I knew cost more than my entire monthly grocery bill. My mouth opened, ready to ask where Tom or my grandchildren Leo and his sister were, but the words caught in my throat. Serena turned to me then, her voice soft but undeniably sharp. Mom, could you just wait downstairs for a bit? We're trying to keep the upstairs organized. The basement's quiet. There's a folding chair down there, I think. I blinked, trying to process her words. She was already turning away, her silver dress shimmering as she disappeared into the throng. I looked down the dimly lit stairs, a cold concrete abyss cluttered with laundry baskets and forgotten items. Something tight and cold gripped my chest. I wanted to ask if this was some cruel joke. I wanted to see if anyone at all, noticed my bewildered presence, but no one did. Not a single person turned their head. In that moment, I understood. I was not a guest. I was an inconvenience. I was an afterthought. So I carried my warm, fragrant cobbler down into the cold, silent basement. I found a folding chair beside a drying rack filled with someone else's mundane laundry and sat down, waiting. From above, the muffled thud of music resonated through the floorboards, punctuated by bursts of joyous laughter. Then I heard it, my name. Serena's voice, clear and cutting, drifting down through the vents. She still brings that same cobbler every year. Bless her heart. And then more laughter. I sat there, staring at the foil-covered dish, the symbol of my effort and love, and a crushing realization settled upon me. I was no longer part of everyone. I stood up, opened my purse, pulled out a small napkin, and scribbled the only thought that came to mind. It wasn't angry, just a stark statement of fact. Thanks for the basement. I raised this family in mine. I placed it carefully on top of the cobbler, left the gift I had wrapped for Leo on the dryer, and walked out the back door without another word. No one stopped me. No one even noticed. I didn't cry on the drive home, not a single tear. I just stared, transfixed, as the red tail lights of other cars and the silhouettes of palm trees blurred past my side window. The radio mumbled low in the background, a talk show about real estate that I wasn't even listening to. The entire way back to my one-bedroom apartment, the image of that damn napkin, perched on top of my cobbler, haunted me. I wondered if anyone would even read it before they tossed the whole thing in the trash. When I pulled into my apartment complex, I didn't go straight inside. I sat in the car a little longer, headlights off, watching a group of teenagers across the parking lot taking selfies in front of someone's new Mustang. They were laughing so freely, so unburdened, as if life had never once disappointed them. I used to laugh like that too, Frank and I, dancing in the kitchen when no one was looking, back when Tom was still in grade school and thought I was the smartest, kindest person in the world. I sat there until the dome light timed out, then grabbed my purse and walked inside, where the air smelled of old carpet and lemon cleaner. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't even take off my shoes. I just stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the picture on the wall, a smiling group shot of all of us at Tom's wedding. Before Serena dyed her hair blonde, before she started correcting my grammar in front of people, before I started shrinking into the background like a misplaced shadow at every family event, I wanted to call someone. Not Tom, not my sister, who would have just told me I was overreacting. I thought about calling the church ladies, but it was Saturday night, and I didn't want pity in their voices, so I made tea. That's what I do when I don't know what else to do. I boiled water, sat at the table, and held the warm mug close to my chest. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the home security app I had helped Tom set up last year when they were worried about porch thieves. Out of habit, I opened it, and there, in stark black and white night vision, I saw the side of their house lit up from the patio lights. People were walking out, laughing. Serena's mother was hugging everyone like she was royalty. And my cobbler, still untouched, sat on the dryer in their garage. The notification wasn't from them. They hadn't called. No one had texted, not even Leo. And that's when it hit me. Not sadness, not even anger. Just this clear, empty realization. I didn't matter in that house. I could vanish, and they'd eat shrimp skewers, post-filtered selfies, and toast champagne like nothing had changed. That was the moment of my true awakening. Around midnight, a gentle knock startled me from my reverie. It was Mrs. Green from 4B, my kind neighbor, who had noticed my lights were still on. She offered me a bowl of extra chili she'd made. I told her I wasn't hungry, but she stayed anyway, sitting across from me in her comfortable house shoes, her presence a soft balm to my raw nerves. She listened patiently, without interruption, as I recounted the entire humiliating ordeal, every word, every dismissive glance, even the scribbled napkin. When I finished, she slowly nodded, then reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "You don't have to take that, Clara," she said, her voice soft but certain. "You're not invisible." I didn't answer then, but later, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, her words echoed in my mind. I wasn't invisible. I just needed to stop waiting around for people who kept pretending not to see me. It was a quiet, profound realization. The pain was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but alongside it, a tiny flicker of defiance began to glow. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had plans, but because the previous night's events replayed relentlessly in my head. The cold surprise look on Serena's face, the distant laughter from upstairs, the suffocating silence when I walked out and no one followed. Even my usual distractions, a crossword puzzle and some toast, couldn't lift the heaviness. So I decided to take my morning walk around the block, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. I ran into my neighbor, Irene, on her way to the mailbox. Her face lit up. "Clara, I saw Tom's party online. Looked like a wedding," she chirped, pulling out her phone before I could even formulate a reply. She scrolled through Serena's Facebook album, titled "The Party of the Year," beaming as if she were giving me a special treat. My face remained blank. There were 153 professionally taken photos, adorned with little digital sparkles. Serena posed elegantly in the foyer with champagne, the kids in matching outfits, Tom standing proudly in front of a custom sign that read, "Happy 40th to our rock." And then I saw it in full, vibrant color, my peach cobbler. It sat untouched on a table in a corner, behind the drink station, not labeled like the other desserts, not even served. My stomach plummeted as Irene kept flipping through the pictures, completely oblivious to my growing stiffness. "And look at this one," she laughed, tapping the screen. "They even got a big family shot on the staircase, just like in those magazines." I leaned closer, and there they all were. Serena's mother, dead center, smiling as if she owned the house. Tom beside her, one hand on her shoulder, my grandchildren grinning in front, and Serena holding a cake I didn't make. I wasn't in the picture, not even in the background. It was as if I had never been there at all. Then Irene swiped too far and paused. "Oh," she said, tapping the screen to zoom in. "That's you, isn't it?" It was a blurry side photo of me, captured as I walked past the front window, gift bag in one hand, head down, cropped out of the fun. Cropped out of my own family. I nodded, handed her the phone back, and mumbled that I had to get going. She didn't notice the tightness in my voice. Back inside my apartment, I sat and stared at the wall for a long time. I wasn't sad. I was beyond sad. It felt like being erased in slow motion. The worst part wasn't even the exclusion. It was the crushing realization that nobody thought I would care. As if my feelings were so insignificant, I wasn't even worth the courtesy of a lie or a flimsy excuse. They simply didn't think about me at all. It was a profound, soul-crushing indifference. A quiet anger, cold and sharp, began to simmer beneath the surface. It wasn't the fiery, explosive kind, but a chilling clarity. I realized how small I had made myself, how much I had allowed them to diminish my worth. This was my life, and for too long, I had let them define my place in it, but no more. That morning, I didn't open my laptop to check emails or play solitaire like usual. Instead, I logged into an old account I hadn't touched in years, one I kept just in case. I clicked through contacts until I found a name I hadn't seen since Frank's funeral. Olivia Sanders. She wasn't family, she wasn't even a friend. She was a lawyer. and she was about to remind me who I used to be before I ever let that house make me feel small. Olivia picked up on the second ring. The moment I heard her voice, calm, sharp, without an ounce of small talk, I felt 20 years younger. It was as if I'd stepped back into a version of myself that didn't wait for permission to matter. Before I could second guess anything, I told her exactly what had happened, starting with the party, the basement, the napkin, and ending with the cobbler, still untouched on that impersonal table. She didn't interrupt once, just listened intently, then finally said, "I take it you're not calling just a vent, Clara." "No," I told her, my voice steady. "I'm not. I want to know what's left in the trust Aunt Lillian set up all those years ago, the one she insisted on naming me as the beneficiary of after I stayed by her side for 6 straight months, while her own children flaked out and disappeared until the funeral." Olivia didn't even need to dig far. She had the paperwork on file and delivered a piece of information that made my chest seize up for a second. "The trust matured last quarter, Clara. You're sitting on just over $2,100,000, 0 cents. I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there, the phone warm against my ear, staring at the silent TV screen where I'd paused an old Hallmark movie an hour earlier. And all I could think about was how I'd spent my last birthday standing beside a washer and dryer while strangers toasted with champagne over my head. "Do you want to access it?" Olivia asked. "No," I told her, "not yet. I needed to think. I needed to decide what kind of person I was going to be now that I wasn't the woman people could push downstairs and forget." I thanked her, wrote the figure on a Post-it note, and stared at it for the rest of the day. It wasn't because I was shocked by the money. I always suspected Aunt Lillian had left something substantial. It was because I realized how long I'd been pretending I had no power, no options, just because it made things easier with Tom and Serena. I wasn't poor, but I lived small, on purpose, careful not to intrude, not to outshine anyone, not to ask for much more than leftovers and holidays I was lucky to be invited to. And all this time, I could have changed everything. I could have moved, traveled, built a new life. But I didn't. I waited for scraps. And now I was done waiting. That night, I didn't make tea. I poured a glass of boxed wine I kept in the back of the pantry for special nights I never let myself have. I sat on the balcony, watching the distant lights from the freeway. I wasn't angry. I was clear. A quiet sense of purpose settled over me. This was not about vengeance, but about justice. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, and my place in the world, not as a forgotten extra, but as the main character of my own story. The next morning, I opened the security app again, not to spy, but to simply observe who was coming and going. I scrolled back through the footage to the night of the party. I watched the moment Serena's mother arrived, beaming as she carried a wrapped box, strikingly similar in shape to the one I had brought. Serena, a picture of effusive joy, enveloped her in a hug fit for royalty. Later in the footage, a wave of cold clarity washed over me as I witnessed them moving my carefully baked peach cobbler off the buffet table entirely, unceremoniously placing it on top of the washer in the garage, where it remained untouched and forgotten. I fast-forwarded to the family photo shoot, where someone could be heard laughing about how they'd finally gotten the lighting just right. My eyes remained dry. There were no tears. I watched with a calm detachment I didn't recognize in myself, as if studying strangers. And maybe, in a profound sense, they were strangers. The people in that video were no longer my family, not truly. They were characters in someone else's manufactured show, and I had merely been a forgotten extra until now. I didn't touch the money right away. I didn't transfer a single dime, didn't book a trip, or buy a single thing. This wasn't about the money itself. It was about what that money represented, and more importantly, what I was finally willing to do with it. So I sat with it for a few days, planning quietly. This wasn't for revenge, not exactly, but for something closer to justice. A version of closure that didn't involve raised voices or slammed doors. It was about showing them the tangible consequences of their indifference without me having to utter a single accusatory word. That's when I called Arthur, my neighbor from down the hall. Arthur, a retired private investigator, was the kind of man who still read every legal document like it was a crossword puzzle. And he always fixed my leaky faucet for free. I asked him if he still had connections in financial tracing. Not to do anything illegal, I assured him, just to check on something. Arthur, with his characteristic quiet efficiency, agreed. Within a week, Arthur confirmed what I had already suspected with a growing certainty. Tom had sunk most of their savings into a highly dubious investment. It was through a friend of a friend who had already been investigated by the SEC. And worse, Tom had brazenly used Serena's name on several of the documents, likely to bypass certain restrictions. This meant that if the whole shaky edifice collapsed, they would both go down and the fallout would be severe. Arthur's findings tied it all back to a man named Curtis Wells, someone I had warned Tom about 2 years ago. I remembered that day vividly. Curtis had come to one of our family barbecues and spent half the evening loudly bragging about cryptocurrency and insider deals. I had pulled Tom aside, trying to impart a mother's wisdom. "He's not a businessman, Tom," I had said, my voice low and concerned. "He's a gambler." But Tom had just rolled his eyes, dismissing me with a condescending wave. "You don't understand the new economy, Mom," he'd told me, as if my 65 years of life experience counted for nothing in the face of his perceived modern brilliance. Perhaps, in his superficial world that was true. I truly didn't understand how anyone could risk their entire family's future on some man's empty promises, all just to project an image of wealth on Instagram. But now, Arthur informed me, the SEC was circling Curtis again. All I had to do was ensure the right documents found their way into the right inbox, anonymously, of course. And that, I realized, was easy enough. I compiled a package, copies of emails, detailed account summaries, crucial screenshots, and a short typewritten note. The note was concise, to the point, check for forged signatures on account transfers. I then discreetly dropped the anonymous envelope into a mailbox 2 neighborhoods away, ensuring no trace led back to me. And then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 10 days later, a photo appeared on Serena's Instagram story. It showed her crying in her car, the tears streaking her perfectly applied makeup, with a caption that simply read, "Prayers appreciated." By the very next afternoon, Tom's company website was offline. All of Serena's meticulously cultivated sponsored brand deals had vanished from her page. The comment sections, once filled with fawning compliments, now buzzed with damning accusations, fraud, and karma. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt quiet. I felt still. It wasn't the triumphant roar of victory, but the profound calm that settles after a storm has passed and you realize you are standing tall, unbroken. The superficial world they had so painstakingly built was crumbling, brick by brick, and I, the silent observer, felt a strange sense of equilibrium. The very next day, I went to the library. There, I carefully printed out the photo I had taken of my cobbler note before I left their party. I slid it into a blank envelope and mailed it to their address with no return name. I didn't include a message. I didn't have to. They knew exactly who it was from. It was my quiet, definitive signature, a final, unarguable statement of intent. That same evening, Serena's mom posted some vague quote on social media about loyalty running thicker than blood. It made me laugh, a dry, humorless chuckle, because if loyalty meant eating cake while you sent the woman who raised your grandkids to wait with a mop and a water heater, then I wanted no part of that kind of family. I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, my laptop open, and watched their social media accounts gradually fall silent. The likes dried up, the carefully curated facade began to crack, and an unsettling silence settled in like dust. It wasn't just satisfying, it was a profound confirmation that sometimes the only thing more powerful than a scream is simply walking away without one. Their world, once so loud with their manufactured success, was now quiet, reflecting the emptiness of their values. It had been 2 weeks since their social media accounts went silent. their meticulously crafted online facade crumbling into digital dust. Then, a knock on my door, unannounced and jarring, broke the silence of my quiet apartment. It wasn't the tentative tap of a neighbor, but a rapid, almost desperate ringing of the doorbell, the kind of forced patience only someone truly desperate pretends to have. When I opened the door, there stood Serena, a stark contrast to the shimmering vision she had been at Tom's party. Her makeup was streaked, her eyes red and puffy, as if she hadn't slept in days. She was clutching the same designer handbag she had flaunted so aggressively on social media all last year, but it looked almost ridiculous now, slung over a drab hoodie and pajama pants. No filters at all, to hide the raw, exposed reality of her distress. Before I could utter a single word, she launched into a breathless torrent of apologies. "I know you're probably still upset, Evelyn, and you have every right to be," she gasped, her voice hoarse. "But we're in real trouble, Clara. Real trouble." I didn't interrupt her. I didn't nod or offer any sign of comfort. I simply stepped aside and let her in, without a word. Part of me wanted to see just how far she would go, how much she would humble herself, before I offered any kind of rescue. She walked straight into my kitchen, her old confident stride surprisingly intact, as if she still owned the place. She sat down at the table just as she used to do when she would dictate dinner plans, and then she started to cry. She explained everything between gasps and sobs, how Tom's accounts were frozen, how the children, Leo and his sister, had been pulled from their expensive after-school programs, how sponsors had dropped her en masse, and how they had to sell one of their luxury cars just to cover the last mortgage payment. Every few sentences she'd repeat, "We didn't know," or "It wasn't personal." I sat across from her, my hands folded calmly in my lap, observing the very same woman who once told me my homemade casserole didn't match their dietary requirements, now begged me for help. The irony was palpable, thick in the air between us. Finally, when she ran out of breath, her sobs subsiding into quiet sniffles, I asked, my voice calm and steady, "What is it you're actually asking me for, Serena?" She looked down at the table, genuinely embarrassed, for the first time since I had known her. "We need help, Clara. Financially, emotionally, I don't even know, just something. Anything. I know I was wrong. I know we treated you like furniture, and I swear I didn't mean it to be cruel." Maybe she truly believed that. Perhaps, in her mind, relegating me to the basement on my own birthday was just a minor decision, made under pressure. Maybe she had convinced herself it wasn't malicious. But to me, it didn't matter anymore. Because whether it was on purpose or not, the pain was the same. The wound had been inflicted, and it had festered. I stood up, walked to the drawer by the fridge, and pulled out an envelope. I had prepared it days earlier when I first saw their online empire begin to collapse. I handed it to her without saying a word, watching her hands tremble as she opened it. Inside was the napkin, the very one I had left on the cobbler at the party, now flattened and placed inside a clear sleeve, like a preserved memory she had tried so desperately to erase, but which I refused to let her. She stared at it for a long, silent moment, her face a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. Then she finally looked up, her eyes wide. Is this supposed to be a message?" she whispered. "No, Serena," I said, my voice calm and quiet, the words resonating with a newfound authority. "It's not a message, it's a reminder." She blinked, looking at me as if she still didn't understand, and that's when I saw it. The exact moment she fully grasped that I wasn't going to offer her anything. Not money, not comfort, not forgiveness wrapped in a check. For the first time since she married my son, she looked like someone who truly knew what it meant to be told no. And it wasn't out of anger on my part, but out of dignity. My dignity. She stood up slowly, her movements stiff, and folded the napkin back into the envelope. "I don't know how we fix this," she murmured, her voice barely audible. I was still holding the door open. "You can't fix something you never thought was broken," I told her, my voice unwavering, "until it costs you." She left without another word, clutching that envelope tightly, as if it might burn through her fingers. I locked the door behind her, not out of spite, but out of a deep, profound sense of peace. The storm she had brought into my home had passed, and the quiet was a tangible relief. 3 days after Serena's visit, I was folding towels on the couch when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize at first. It was just a simple message that read, "Hi, Grandma. I'm sorry I saw you leave that night. I didn't know what to do." And when I saw the name at the top, Leo, my grandson, I had to sit down. For all the silence I'd accepted from that house, from Tom and Serena, this one small message hit harder than I expected. It was a crack in the wall of indifference, a tiny beacon of genuine human connection. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the screen, my hands going still, the laundry slipping off my lap. It took a moment to compose myself, to find the right words. And when I finally did, I typed, "Thank you for saying that. Would you like to meet for a walk?" He answered within seconds, "Yes, please." We met the next day at the park near my apartment, just after school. He arrived in his usual hoodie and jeans, carrying his backpack as if it weighed 10 times more than it should. When he saw me, he walked over quickly, a little awkward at first. He was taller than I remembered, his voice deeper. "I wanted to say something that night," he began, looking down at his feet, "but I didn't know what was happening until you were gone. And then Mom said you just left because you weren't feeling well." I nodded, letting him talk, because I could see it in his eyes. He had carried that guilt for weeks, maybe even longer. It was a burden he shouldn't have had to bear alone. Finally, he reached into his backpack and pulled out the small gift bag I'd brought to the party, the one with the blue ribbon I had tied myself. "I found this in the garage," he said, handing it to me. "It was stuffed behind the cooler. I thought maybe you'd want it back." I took it from his hands slowly, my heart tightening, not because of the gift itself, but because he had gone looking, because he had seen it and decided it mattered enough to return. "You didn't have to do this, Leo," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He shook his head hard. I wanted to. I could tell this wasn't something Serena had asked him to do. This was him, alone, trying to make something right in a mess he hadn't created. We sat on the bench for a while, watching the dogs chase each other across the field, the comfortable silence punctuated by the distant sounds of children playing. Then he finally asked, his voice hesitant, "Are you mad at us?" "I'm not mad at you, Leo," I said. "I never was." He looked relieved. "Good," he murmured. I don't want us to be like them." That was the part that made my throat close up. Because I saw what it cost him to say that, to admit that he saw the cracks too. That even at 15, he understood there was a crucial difference between smiling for pictures and showing up when it truly counted. "You did something none of them did, Leo," I told him, reaching out to gently touch his arm. "You noticed. That matters." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and I saw a glimmer of hope there. Like maybe he'd been waiting to hear that since the night I walked out. When we stood to leave, I hugged him tight, tighter than I had in years, and whispered, "No matter what happens, Leo, you'll always have a place with me." As he walked back to Serena's car, waiting at the edge of the lot, I saw her inside, staring straight ahead, pretending not to see me. And for once, I didn't care. Because that boy, her son, had just done what she couldn't. He had made me feel seen again. The next time I saw Serena wasn't planned, but I knew the insistent knock on my door that Sunday afternoon wasn't from a neighbor. It came with the kind of forced patience only someone truly desperate pretends to have. When I opened it, there she was again, this time with Tom beside her. He was wearing a collared shirt, as if he were going to church, even though it was wrinkled and buttoned wrong at the top. Serena had a Tupperware container in her hands, like a peace offering. But the moment she saw my expression, her eagerness faltered. Still, she pushed through with that same bright, tight voice she used when she used to host family dinners, saying, "We just wanted to talk, just clear the air." I stepped back, letting them in not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see how far they'd go, how much they'd pretend. They sat down at my kitchen table, their old familiar spots, as if it were still their show. As if I was supposed to be grateful they finally remembered I existed. Serena opened the Tupperware to reveal lemon bars. Her go-to apology food, the same recipe she once mocked me for calling too tart. I said nothing, just sat across from them, letting them sweat through their rehearsed speeches. Tom started, his voice strained. "We've had a rough time lately, Mom, and we realized we could have handled things differently." I watched him closely, noticing how he avoided eye contact, how his leg bounced nervously under the table, how his voice cracked, not from guilt, but from sheer discomfort. Then Serena cut in, shifting from falsely kind to candid so fast it almost felt choreographed. "Clara, I know we've had tension, but this whole inheritance thing, look, it's a shock. And I don't think it's crazy to say we deserve a little of that. I mean, this family's success didn't happen in a vacuum." The moment the word deserve left her mouth, something in me clicked off. It was the first time she dropped the mask completely, the first time she articulated what she truly came for. I didn't flinch, didn't scold, didn't argue. I just reached under the table and clicked the voice recorder I'd placed there before they arrived, because a part of me knew this moment would come, that eventually she'd say something that would reveal the unvarnished truth. Serena kept going, digging deeper without realizing, saying things like, "Tom built this life with your help, sure, but we've continued that. We've maintained it." And then she uttered the line that sealed it. "You wouldn't even have that money if not for this family." Tom didn't stop her, didn't correct her. He just sat there nodding. "Is that how you see it?" I asked quietly. Serena blinked as if she suddenly realized she'd gone too far. But it was too late. I stood up, walked over to the counter, and picked up a manila envelope I had prepped earlier, just in case. I handed it to Tom without explanation. Inside was a printed transcript of every transfer Tom had made using Serena's name. The very same documents I had anonymously forwarded to the SEC, but this time with a little post-it that said, "You're welcome to read what's already public record." They both looked at it as if it might explode. "You don't need my money," I said, my voice unwavering. "You need a lawyer." Before either of them could stammer out a reply, I opened the front door and held it wide. Serena stood slowly, her cheeks flushed, her lips tight, while Tom just stared down at the envelope like a child caught cheating on a test. As they walked out, Serena turned to say something, but I didn't let her finish. "Don't worry," I said. "This time you're not going to be cropped out. You're the main picture now." I closed the door before they could answer, turned off the recorder, and sat down at my kitchen table alone. No longer waiting to be part of their family, but finally proud I'd walked away before they burned everything down with me inside. The silence after they left wasn't uncomfortable. It was earned, like the house could finally exhale now that the tension had been pushed out with them. I didn't feel triumphant or bitter, just calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. That night, I made myself a proper dinner, baked chicken and steamed vegetables. Nothing fancy, but something warm that made the apartment smell like home. As I ate, I looked around at the small space that used to feel lonely and realized it had started to feel like mine again. Not just a holding place between visits or guilt texts from Tom. For the first time in a long time, I let myself plan something just for me. Something simple but deeply meaningful. So I sent a few texts to the people who had truly shown up for me. Mrs. Green from 4B, Arthur from next door, Carol and Denise from the church book club, and of course Leo, who responded with an instant, "Yes, I'll be there." By Sunday afternoon, I had the table set for 6. Mismatched chairs borrowed from neighbors, cloth napkins I'd sewn years ago but never used, and a roast in the oven that made the whole apartment smell like Thanksgiving. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to smiles, real ones, the kind that crinkle eyes and don't wait for a camera. We sat around my tiny table, eating and laughing and sharing stories. It wasn't a party, not the kind that gets posted online or photographed with filters. It was something better, something honest. When we finished dessert, I stood up and told Leo I had something for him. Everyone got quiet as I handed him an envelope. Not flashy, just cream-colored with his name in cursive on the front. He opened it slowly, pulled out the papers, and his eyes scanned the top line where it read, 529 college savings plan fully funded. For a second, he didn't say anything, just blinked at me, and then looked around the table like he needed someone else to confirm it was real. "This is for you, Leo," I said, "for noticing when others didn't, for remembering who baked the cobbler and who left quietly." He stood up and hugged me hard, not the quick teenage side hug, but a full embrace that made me close my eyes. And when he whispered, "Thank you, Grandma," I knew I had done something profoundly right. Because in that moment, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't forgotten. I was the matriarch again, not of the family I raised, but of the one I built from scratch, with people who saw me, respected me, and didn't ask me to sit in any basement. As the evening wound down, we played cards and passed around leftovers. I realized I didn't need a mansion or a formal dining room to feel rich. I just needed people who clapped when I stood up to refill their tea, who offered to help with dishes, who asked for my cobbler recipe like it was gold. And as I watched Leo laugh with Denise over a card game he clearly didn't understand, I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not grief, just peace, the kind that comes from knowing you don't have to beg for a seat at someone else's table when you can build your own. It was a week after the dinner when Tom showed up, alone. No call, no warning. He just knocked like someone who wasn't sure what kind of welcome he'd get. I knew it was him before I even opened the door because that knock wasn't rushed or nervous. It was quiet, like a man trying to pretend he wasn't about to ask for something he didn't earn. When I opened it, he stood there holding nothing, hands in his pockets, shoulders low, like he'd rehearsed an apology but forgot the lines. "Hi, Mom," he said. I said nothing, just waited. Finally, he added, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, not because I was soft, but because I needed to hear what he had to say in full, without him hiding behind a door. He walked in slowly, as if the air felt heavier than he remembered, and sat down at the same kitchen table where he used to eat cereal as a kid, but now he looked like a stranger in his own memory. I didn't sit across from him. I stayed standing, arms folded, giving him space to talk. "I know you're probably done with me, Mom," he began, his voice tight. "And maybe you should be, but I didn't come here to beg. I just needed to say I'm sorry." I nodded once, still silent, and he kept going, his voice growing tighter now. "Serena's gone. She took the kids to her mom's place in Florida. The house is on the market. I'm renting a condo near the freeway. I lost everything, and it wasn't just the business, it was all of it. My marriage, my reputation, my peace. I felt a tiny flicker of something. Regret? Maybe? Not for him, but for the boy I once tucked in at night. The boy who used to bring me drawings of our house with a heart over it and me plus Mom plus Dad equals home, scrawled in marker. He looked up at me then, his eyes red, not from tears, just tired. "You were right about Serena, about Curtis, about all of it, and I was too stupid or proud or scared to listen. I let her run everything, and I stood by while she hurt you." I finally sat down across from him, not close, just enough to look him in the eye, and asked, "And what now? What are you really here for?" He paused long enough that I knew he didn't have a clear answer. Then finally he said, "I don't know, maybe just to say I miss you, that I see it now, what I let happen, what I became." There was a silence between us, so thick I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. And then I told him, "You didn't just let it happen, Tom. You chose it. Again and again, every time you saw me being pushed aside and said nothing, you built a house where I was only welcome if I stayed out of the way. And now that it's gone, you want the pieces of me that are left." He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, just nodded slowly and stood to leave. But before he got to the door, he turned and said, "So, that's it? You're turning your back on your own son?" I stood too, walked over and held the door open, and with my hand on the knob, I said, "Family isn't blood, Tom. It's who opens the door when you're downstairs alone." Before he could respond, I closed it, turned the lock, and walked away without looking back. Because for once, I wasn't the one waiting for an invitation. I was the one deciding who deserved a seat at my table. And as I sat back down with a fresh cup of tea, the silence in my apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned.